Hello and welcome to a very exciting video. Today I will be talking about Unmatched Adventures. If you are unfamiliar with Unmatched Adventures, I would highly recommend checking out the Kickstarter page. You can pledge now. I think it's a very good and quite frankly cheap price for all the content that you're going to get for a cooperative version of Unmatched. So y'all know me, y'all know I love the competitive scene. So while I do love the cooperative version of Unmatched, and I know that will personally let me introduce a lot of my family that don't play a lot of board games into Unmatched, I often look at the fighters competitively and see how they will be competitively. So I thought I'd kind of go through all the cards that we have seen in the campaign so far and give my competitive thoughts on each of the fighters. So without further ado, let's get started and hop into my most anticipated fighter from the set, Nikola Tesla. All right, Nikola Tesla. So what do we know about Tesla, right? I did play Tesla's set, but my goal is just to share my thoughts given what I know and what has been revealed in the campaign. And also, it was a while ago since I played this. I don't really remember all of his cards and what they do. But I will start by sharing what his ability is by reading the rule book that was once again shared on the Kickstarter campaign. He's got the longest here. Nikola Tesla has two coils, which we can see here in the picture, represented by separate tokens. Each token can either be charged or discharged. At the start of the game, Tesla starts with one coil charged. At the end of each of your turns, you may charge one coil. Interesting to know that that sounds like it's optional. Flipping it from your discharge side to its charge side. At the start of your turn, if both coils are charged, deal 1 damage to each opposing fighter adjacent to damage. However, that's not optional. Then you may move each of those fighters 1 space using this ability. Using this ability does not discharge the coils. So when you use this kind of auto damage, it doesn't discharge the coils, which is great. Many of Tesla's cards let you discharge 1 or 2 coils to trigger effects as indicated by the lightning bolt icons. When you discharge a coil, flip the token over from its charge side to its discharge side. Discharging coils is always optional. Tesla's cards have separate effects based on whether you discharge 1 or 2 coils. Sometimes these effects will be in addition to other effects on the card. Also, sometimes they will replace other effects. Keyword also, they will be in addition to other effects. If it has the keyword instead, it replaces the other effect. If you discharge 2 coils, read the effect for 1 coil and then read the effect for 2 coils and resolve accordingly. If you discharge 2 coils, you may not resolve the effect for 1 coil twice. All right, so there we have it. So Nikola Tesla, and we can see in the picture he has 14 health, and we did get his health or his character card revealed in the Discord to show that Nikola Tesla is ranged. So, and he's a move 2 fighter. So we have a move 2 fighter ranged. So that's good because we know that solo fighters are generally in a little bit rougher of a position, but the fact that he's ranged is huge. So let's just kind of talk about his ability, right? It seems like he can get a lot of passive damage if he has both of his coils charged and he's adjacent to an opposing fighter. So the situations in which that would arise is against melee fighters, and in which they attacked you and you defended and chose not to discharge any coils, or your card didn't allow you to do so, right? I could see another scenario in which maybe you're at 0 charged coils and then your opponent attacks you and somehow you charge the coils. Once again, I don't remember the cards, so don't quote me on any of this, but that would be a scenario in which you would also have 2 charged coils at the start of your turn. So I'm curious to know how often that will trigger, but it's interesting to know that it's not optional. So the zap is not optional. So if he ends with 2 charged coils and you're Beowulf, you might want to, for example, double maneuver and just end with Bayo adjacent to Tesla. And Tesla, it's not optional, so he would have to deal 1 damage to Beowulf, basically giving him a free rage. Now, it's important to know that he does 1 damage and then also can move them. And because he's ranged, as long as they're still in their zone, then he could double attack them. So I kind of see this as like a bunny hop for Miss Marvel, assuming that your opponent is pressuring you. And that is quite good. We've seen the strength that it has in Miss Marvel's deck. So if it's a strategy that he can be playing for, I think it's quite good. Now, it's interesting to note that he charges 1 at the end of each of his turns. So if he's already at 2 and he ends his turn, he can't overcharge, right? There's nothing to do there. So I kind of like that. I think he's motivated to use his coils so that no coils are gone to waste. And so I think if he's just sitting back and waiting for the opponent to attack him, and the opponent is just waiting or sitting back waiting for Tesla to attack, I think Tesla's losing a lot of value. Now, it obviously depends on how many schemes he has and how good those schemes are, if he can afford to do that. But let's say a game takes 10 turns. That's 10 coils that you are getting charged. And if for 4 of those you are already at max coils, that's a huge percentage of the number of coils that you're getting throughout the course of the game. So I really think that Tesla is motivated to use his coils wisely and often use them so that he gets them back at the end of his turn. So very interested to see what that looks like. Now, we only have a few cards revealed for him, but the one I want to highlight is 7 Hertz, which I believe it says it has 3 copies of, so that's a high frequency that's involved in that deck. But 7 Hertz, after combat, you may discharge coils. If you discharge 1, you gain 1 action. If you discharge 2, you also draw a card, which is huge, right? So it's a 4 value attack, so we know that Skirmish and Leap Away are able to run away and potentially get out of your zone. However, you get to decide afterwards if you then want to gain an action and also draw a card. So that's huge, right? You kind of get the ability to determine, okay, like they're out of my zone, I'm at full coils. Do I really want to, chase after them? If it's your first action, you might as well take the gain an action, then you can maneuver and hopefully hit them again. Or maybe if they run away and it was your second action and you have 2 coils, you can just discharge 1 to gain an action, maybe maneuver further away so that they'd have to boost to get to you, and then you recharge 1 at the end of your turn. So you'd kind of be at the same spot that you were, but they have to boost in order to approach you. So this card to me looks very solid. We also see it's a 3 boost. So 3 copies of this, a 3 boost if you need to get around the map on a move 2 ranged fighter. This just seems like a really, really good card. And here we have kind of some cards where you can't read all of them, but we see fully charged in both of these pictures. And on the bottom, we can actually see that it is charge both coils and gain 1 action. So we can see maybe like you attacking first turn with a 7 Hertz and they weren't able to run away. You spend both of them to gain an action and draw a card, and then you can immediately play fully charged and fully charge your coils. And so it's basically like you're at the start of the turn again. However, you have a different card than you did previously, and you were able to knock a defense out of the opponent's hand with 7 Hertz or just get 4 damage. So depending on like how easy it is to spend coils and how desperately you need them, this card could be good to okay. I don't think it's ever a bad card. I wish we could see the boost value on it to see if he wants to use it to get around the board, but my assumption is that it's a pretty good card, especially if like defensively you were able to spend some coils for maybe a really good effect and you want to be fully charged at the start of your turn or sorry, after the start of your turn on your first action. So anyway, that's Nikola Tesla. I'm very excited to see how he plays, but it looks like you can kind of play him different ways. Against melee fighters, you might be leaning a lot more heavily on your ability and kind of a more passive play style. And against ranged fighters, you might be kind of not really worrying about your ability too much. And so you might be spending your coils a little more liberally, which is really cool that he kind of has those decision points. 14 health is pretty squishy, so we will see if he has any healing or what that looks like. But I'm very, very excited for Tesla and just seeing what becomes of him. All right, and here we have Annie Christmas, who I'm so excited for, and I know that I believe she really fits my wife's play style, so I think I will be playing a lot of games with Annie Christmas involved. So let's go ahead and start off by reading her special ability. It's a lot shorter than Tesla's. Annie Christmas adds +2 to the value of her attacks if her health is less than the defender's health. Like all special abilities, this is not a card effect and cannot be canceled by cards such as Feint. So once again, we see an ability that makes Arthur cry. But anyway, that's really cool, right? So just to start off, we see that she is 14 health. We've also seen her ability card. She's moved to her and her sidekick Charlie, who has 8 health. However, Charlie is ranged. So let's just go ahead and hop into that just a little bit. So 14 health for Annie Christmas. That's not a lot of health again, but she wants to be at a lower health threshold to get her ability to trigger. So I think it's totally fine, right? It seems like that's how she's meant to be, right? That's okay, right? If she was saying at 18 health, right, it would take her a long time before her ability would actually be online. So starting at 14 health, right, against Bigfoot, her first attack onto Bigfoot is triggering her ability. So that's really cool. But let's just talk about Charlie, right? I think we have 3 sidekicks that are at 8 or more health, right? We have Jabberwock, we have the Huntsman, we have Wiggloff. Huntsman dies very quickly because his defenses are kind of garbage, and he adds a lot of value to red. So you want to get him out of the way pretty quickly. Jabberwock, kind of similar. Jabberwock can actually defend with a lot of cards, but 4 of those cards are momentous shifts and Mangsome Foes, which is Alice's main damage output. So you really don't want to play those. And then we have skirmishes, which you also really don't want to play, but you can afford to for Jabberwock. And then we have feints and regroups. So most of the time you see Jabberwock defend with a feint, maybe a skirmish, and then some regroups. So he dissolves pretty quickly too. And then we see Wiggloff. Wiggloff actually doesn't dissolve very quickly, but that's because he doesn't add a lot of value to Beowulf's deck, right? Beowulf's already got 17 health with potential 4 healing. Then you've got Wiggloff sitting at 9 health, right? So oftentimes Wiggloff is just a body block for Beowulf, which is really good, but that's where his value lies. It doesn't actually lie in cards. It just revolves around your opponent having to spend a number of cards to kill him. But once again, he's got feints and skirmishes, which he can use, which are defenses that Beowulf can also use out of his 12 defenses. So he wants to be really careful about if he's actually defending Wiggloff and what value he gets from Wiggloff. So anyway, judging by that, if I had to guess, I'm assuming Charlie, just kind of with the theme, he either it can be pretty tanky, and he just body blocks for Annie Christmas like Wiggloff, or he adds a lot of value with a lot of cool cards in her deck, but he is very squishy. So those, from what we know, that's what I'm expecting from Charlie for this. If it's not, then that's great, right? If he's like, cloak and dagger level health and he can also survive a lot, that's huge, right? That's different. That's something we haven't seen before. So I'm very excited if that's the case. But given by the history, it seems like that's not. But we see 8 health and ranged, right? So that's huge, right? Just being ranged. And I also hope that he has some way to deal with 1 health sidekicks. And the reason I just highlight that is that Annie's ability doesn't trigger on 1 health sidekicks or low health sidekicks for that matter, right? She might have a hard time killing Jabberwock or sorry, Jackalope, either or, because she's starting at 14 health and they're sitting at 6 and 8 health. So very interesting to know that she's like can just smack heroes really hard, but when it comes to sidekicks, she has a hard time dealing with them. So I hope Charlie has a way to deal with either pesky 1 health sidekicks or multi-health sidekicks. But anyway, enough about kind of my thoughts on that and her ability. Let's just go ahead and hop into the few cards that we see from Annie Christmas. We see this Captain's Orders card. This was revealed on the Kickstarter. Place Annie in any empty space in her zone. Then place another friendly fighter in an empty space in Annie's zone. Gain 1 action. Now, it's important to note that that friendly fighter doesn't have to start in Annie's zone. So they can be all the way across the map, right? So we see this for the cooperative version. It's huge, right? You can kind of teleport your friends to where they need. But in competitive play, which is what I'm analyzing here, it's huge for Charlie, right? And it's also, you place Annie in any empty space in her zone, and then you place a friendly fighter anywhere in her new zone, right? So that's huge, especially on certain maps like maybe Sarpedon, where you're sitting, let's say your opponent is in the brown zone and you're in the pink zone. You can use Captain's Orders to hop to that pink, yellow, and brown zone, and then you can throw Charlie in the brown zone as well, and he's ranged, so he's able to attack your opponent from there. So it's really, really cool that that exists, and we also see that it gains her an action, which is huge. So it's kind of like a discount beast form, or sorry, mist form, I would say, where if your opponent's playing around the zones well, you really don't get this to use like a double attack. However, if you're playing around it well, and depending on map layouts, there might be some spots where you can use that to warp wherever and throw Charlie wherever you need to be able to get a double attack ranged on your opponent, which it might be good into like Wukong or some of those other fighters that hide a lot behind their sidekicks. So very, very cool card. I honestly would say maybe one of the coolest cards in the game currently, just because of how much you have to care about positioning, which we're seeing a lot more characters that do that, right? We see Miss Marvel, we see Squirrel Girl that cares a lot about where her squirrels are positioned, and we see Captain's Orders. So very, very cool. Especially against ranged fighters. To me, when I read cards like this, it's a very anti-ranged card where, your opposing fighter maneuvers, now they're within range, they attack you, then you play Captain's Orders, hop next to them, maybe even pin them, right? That's the crazy thing, is your opponent really has to worry about their zone layout so that they're not immediately pinned by you and Charlie, depending on how beefy Charlie is. So anyway, very, very cool card. Very much looking forward to it. And we also see it's a 2 value boost. However, the card itself could be worth like a 6 value boost, depending on how large the map is and how large the zone coverage is, right? You could maneuver into a new zone, then play this card, hop there, and then attack them. So I don't ever really see this being used as a boost, I think, except in very interesting circumstances. And we do see that she has 2 copies of it. So if she had 3, it'd obviously be better, but I think it makes sense that she only has 2. The real question is, how much can your opponent choose to end? How much is Annie aggressing the opposing fighter? And my assumption is a lot, because 14 health is pretty squishy in fatigue, and she doesn't do really well. Her whole ability is, right, I think, killing your opponent, because she's got a +2, right? All the +2 fighters we've seen so far, other than Moon Knight, really just wants to kill your opponent. So I think that's what we'll see from Annie. It really depends on how many passes she has. Next, we see a little bit of a card here, Mississippi something. So we do see alligators in the background, and can we just talk about the art for a second? The art on her cards just is amazing, in my opinion. I'm so excited to play this. But it's an immediately effect, and then it just says Annie's health. So we don't really know. I don't know if we've really seen any cards that say like Annie's health, or specific fighter's health, other than maybe like the Resurrect from Willow, where you like set somebody's health to a certain amount. So we might see that, where maybe she immediately gets to set her health from like 5 to 8 or something, right? She kind of maybe gets to choose where to put her health total at. So that might be really cool for her ability to trigger, right? If her opponent's at 6 health, she might want to set her health to 5, and she can maybe make that decision after seeing what the opponent's attack card is. Who knows, right? There could be a number of different things, but I just wanted to highlight that from what we know with this card, it's an effect that I think we probably haven't seen before, which is really cool. And it has to do with her health, which is her whole ability, which is also very cool. We see this 1 value versatile. So with her ability, it would be 3 on offense and then just a 1 on defense. But that's okay, I think, as Annie, because she wants to take some damage, I think, to get her effect triggering. So a 1 value defense or just a 3 value attack with her ability, I think is okay, assuming the effect is pretty good. We see after combat, the opposing, and then combat. So I really don't think we know too much about this card. There's really so many things that it could be, but we see the card is called Striking and then B. So if I had to put money on it, I think we can see maybe that's an E or something afterwards, but Striking Beauty makes sense for me for that card. And then we see that, you know, it's just some gorgeous artwork, and that's actually one of the foil cards. And you can kind of see the design in the background. It's going to be so cool to look in foil. So anyway, very excited for Annie Christmas. If I had to guess, I think like her really caring about her health totals in response to her opponent's health totals is going to be very finicky and tricky to play around. I think players that can play around it well will do really well with her. I think players that can't play around it well will kind of not do well with her. So I think she's going to be a character that is going to require a lot of time to play well. But once those games are kind of figured out, I think she's going to be pretty good. So I'm excited to see where she ends up and excited to get this to the table, hopefully in August. Let's go ahead and talk about the Golden Bat next. All right, and here we have the Golden Bat, the first ever superhero, a Japanese superhero. Very, very cool concept. Let's just hop into by talking about his special ability, shall we? The Golden Bat gains +2 to his attacks if you did not take the maneuver action that turn. He still gets this bonus if he was moved by another effect, such as his Arrive Just in Time card. However, he does not get this bonus if you took the maneuver action but did not move him. Like all special abilities, this is not a card effect and cannot be canceled by cards such as Fame. Now it says like all special abilities. That's wrong. We all know that's wrong. And Arthur is crying once again from his grave in the tier list. But anyway, let's talk about that, right? So we see he has 18 health, and we also saw his ability card, which has a movement of 3. So we see a melee fighter that has a movement of 3, right? So we're kind of hitting this stride, I think, with solo fighters, where if you're a solo fighter and you're melee, you got move 3. If you're a solo fighter and you're ranged, then you're okay with a move 2, right? Jekyll and Hyde, I am. There are some exceptions to this, but in the later versions, I think we're kind of seeing that a lot, which is pretty cool. Just to kind of buff up some of the solo fighters and their win rates. But anyway, so his ability, it sounds like, if your opponent is approaching you a lot, so you're able to get like a first action attack on them, maybe they have a movement effect or maybe they don't, then if your ability's triggering a lot, I think +2 to your cards is just really huge. So once again, this is a question of tempo, right? Like, how much is your opponent approaching you? And if the answer is a lot, then I think he's going to be really good. We also see that if your opponent is not approaching you, he has a card that is Arrive Just in Time that it sounds like is a movement or a placement effect that is not a maneuver, right? So it sounds like he has some ways to trigger that. We can think of like a mist form or a Travelers in the Night from Moon Knight, where you move 4 spaces and then you gain an action. For example, that would be huge in a deck like this, where he could potentially get a double attack with his ability online. So not quite sure what Arrive Just in Time does, but anyway, that exists. Then looking at his cards, we see Vaporizing Eye Beams that was shared at this, and this is the only card that we can read fully. on these 4 cards that were shared, and it says after combat your opponent discards 1 random card. So we see it's not an ambush in that it's not a during combat add the value to your attack, but you just discard a random card, and we see 3 copies of that. It also is just a 2. But if your ability is online, obviously it's a 4. So when I look at a card like this, to me, this is a perfect sidekick killer card. Like if they feint it, okay, I'm totally happy with that. Against single health sidekicks, right? Often I'm probably ending adjacent to them because they're approaching, like for example, Wukong. So this would be a 4 value attack to just kill a clone and also get a discard out of it. It's pretty nice. I see this just kind of a card to be used on, 1 health sidekicks. I think when you get your ability to trigger on your opponent, I think you probably want to be smacking a little harder than just 2. But the fact to me that it says your opponent discards a random card rather than being an ambush says that he's got enough damage in other places that this is just a tempo card, right? You want to force your opponent to have lower hand count, so maybe that when you do approach and you go in, they don't attack you, they actually have to just run away. And at sitting at 18 health, you're kind of okay if you're kind of pressing the aggression and doing a bunch of damage, and then sitting back in the second half of the game and forcing them to come to you and start getting your ability to trigger. So that's really nice. You also see super strength. It's a 5 value attack. Now, I think I'm correct in saying this is the first +2 fighter that we've seen that has a 5 value attack base, right? Achilles has a 4, Alice has a 4, Moon Knight has a 4, right? So maximum it can be is a 6. This is a 7, right? And so if you trigger this and it's a 7 and you're not up against Wukong or somebody else that might, be able to kind of turn that around on you or ignore all of it, that's huge, right? Right? If you're up against Sinbad, that's a guaranteed 3 damage. Assuming some of the higher value blocks are gone, that's 4 damage. It's nuts. So to me, this card it's a 1 value boost as well. So it just makes sense to me that this is just where your damage is coming from. And I think we see that he has 2 copies of that. So this is a card I think in most matchups you just want to be using, and that's where your damage is coming from. And then we see Insight of the Ancients. I believe the lore is that Golden Bat is from Atlantis. And so we kind of see a lot of that cool artwork here. But this is a 2 value boost, which it makes him move for 5, which totally fine on most maps except Yukon. So 5 movement is totally fine. And then we see after combat, if you won the combat, so it's a 3 value on defense, potentially 5 value on attack. So you can win the combat, much like that's the part I like from Moon Knight's deck. Return a random card in your discard pile to your hand. So competitively, I don't know if we'll really see this card used a lot, but it's very cool, in my opinion, just to have a really neat effect. I think it will be a hassle on TTS, where you then take this well-sorted discard pile, mix them all together, randomly get a card back into your hand, and then maybe have to resort your discard pile. At least in competitive games, we really like to card count. So that's going to be a mess. TTS, it'll be a little easier, but you'll still have to sort it again. Casually, I don't see this being a problem, but it's kind of a really cool card. I see like maybe arrive just in time. You play that, you're able to get next to them without maneuvering. That's all we know. Somehow that triggers, and then maybe attack with Insight of the Ancients for a 5 value attack, and then probably get that card that you just played, arrive just in time, back into your hand, right? So early game, I think we can see some really cool shenanigans with getting some cards or having good odds to get a card you want back. So that's really cool. But late game, I don't like the idea of it being like, okay, I really need this card in order to win. So please let me get this card. It's important to note that it does put it into your hand, so it doesn't necessarily help you in fatigue circumstances, which I think is totally fine, depending on how well he does there. But getting it into your hand is often sometimes scarier unless you're against somebody like Sherlock or somebody who can capitalize on knowing the cards in your hand. So anyway, very straightforward character, I think, but I'm very excited to see how he does. And assuming he can put the tempo on the opposing fighter, I think he'll be a force to be reckoned with. And I think we might actually see him be able to do well into like maybe Bigfoot or somebody where you can use super strength to guarantee 3 damage onto Jackalope, and you just need to do that twice, and the Jackalope is dead. So I'm very curious to see how it plays, but I think he's one of the fighters that cares the most about tempo of all the fighters that we've seen, because it sounds like if you're chasing your opponent, all of your cards are not +2. If your opponent's chasing you, all of your cards are +2, right? It's kind of like Medusa, where if Medusa's chasing your opponent, she gets 0 pings. If the opponent is chasing her, then she's getting all the pings, right? But it seems like it might be even more important. I'm curious to see how he'll do into ranged fighters, because they can kind of play around it. So he'll want to be on maps that have lots of pockets, but we'll see what becomes of him. But I, for one, am ecstatic just on his mini looking so amazing, his health dial looking so cool, card back is amazing, and just the art on his cards is really cool. So I'm very excited for all of those reasons. And last but not least, Dr. Jill Trent. All right, and Dr. Jill Trent, let's go ahead and read her special ability. Dr. Jill Trent has 2 wondrous gadgets. They're not normal gadgets, they're wondrous, represented on the 2 sides of her gadget token, which we see here in the picture. At the start of your turn, so much like Jekyll and Hyde, decide which gadget you want to be active and place that side of the token face up. You may choose the same gadget as on previous turns, so you can just choose whichever one is more applicable at the time. Both of Jill's gadgets have effect that resolves when she attacks. Her sidekick Daisy does not use the active gadget unless you play Sister in Arms. So we see a card name as well called Sister in Arms that it sounds like allows Daisy to use the gadget. Both gadgets compare the printed value of your attack cards against the printed value of your opponent's defense cards. If your opponent did not play a card, treat their printed value as 0. And zooming in on these gadgets here on the rule book, Hypno Ray Blaster is a during combat effect, which says if your card's printed value is lower than your opponent's, so you want to aim for lower, reveal the top card of your opponent's deck. So it's just a reveal. Increase the value of your attack by the boost value of the revealed card. So that could be huge in some matchups. And then after combat, on Ultra Biotic Tonic, sorry, that was the Hypno Ray Blaster, Ultra Bionic Tonic. After combat, if your card's printed value is higher than your opponent's, Jill Trent recovers 1 health. Vorpal doesn't like me reading the abilities, apparently. But anyway, so we see both of the things. You either want to have a printed value that's higher than the opponent's or lower than the opponent's card, only when attacking. To me, this is like a Sherlock level fighter, it sounds like, where you really need to know the printed values of all of your opponent's cards and defenses, specifically defenses and versatiles. So that's huge. It also generally want to know the boost values to know if Hypno Ray Blaster is something you want to be doing a lot, right? For example, against Yananga, who has a deck of almost all 3 boosts, Hypno Ray Blaster is going to be great, because if you attack with like a 2 value attack, your opponent defends with a 3, which Yananga has a ton of, then you reveal the top card of her deck. So now you have a 5 value attack. You're hitting her for 2 plus whatever your effect is. So that's really cool. Then we also see that she has a guaranteed way to heal if she knows for a fact that her card is a higher printed value than the opponent's. And the reason I say guaranteed is because one of the cards that we share here, in most matchups that it is. So we see that she only has 13 health. We see that she's 6. Daisy is 6 health. We know that Daisy has a card called Sister in Arms. We know that they are both move 2. and they're both melee. So I think that's good, right? Move to melee, really strong ability, it sounds like. If you are, I'm assuming if you're getting that to trigger correctly every time in every combat, you're probably winning the game. So I think there's a lot of mind games of, okay, is this a 2? Is this a 1? Like, kind of what is it, right? If this is a 1, do I want to block with a 4? And basically, if they have Hypno Ray Blaster online so that they reveal boost value of my card and they don't really get any damage off, or on the off chance that it's a 3, then they reveal and they still get 2 damage off, right? There's kind of some interesting mind games that you can play there. So I'm very, very intrigued to see how she plays. But let's go ahead and hop into her cards. We see Utility Belt here on the left. It looks like it could be a longer title maybe afterwards, but Utility Belt makes sense. Kind of a Batman style card, thing, which is really cool. And we see After Combat something, and then we have some options. So I'm assuming After Combat choose 1, maybe After Combat choose 2. It wouldn't be After Combat choose 3, of course, because then it would just say do these things. So I think it's one of those things because we do see the same syntax that they've been using for options. We see Jill, Trent, and then R. So Jill, Trent, R, we don't really know what that is. We see Move Jill something, and then we see draw 1 card, I'm assuming. So it's, if you choose 1, maybe choose 2. I love cards with choices because that means it changes depending on the matchup. So I really hope that, right, for example, against a first action attack, you probably want to move Jill Trent 1 space. That's probably what you choose if you can only choose 1. Maybe you move 1 and draw a card, right? I really don't know what that first option is. We'd be able to read more into it. But if you can move, right, first action attack, you want to move Jill Trent. They don't get a second attack. Okay, you're good. On a second action attack, you might want to just draw a card to go ahead and give you more options if your opponent is ending adjacent to you. So very, very cool. Then we see Energizing Spray here at the bottom. We see it's a 5 value base attack. So that's why I highlighted. To me, you always use the healing gadget with this card. I think it makes sense because nobody's got like a 6 value defense that you want to hit under for Hypno Ray Blaster. And it's basically a free health because very, very few people have printed 5 value defenses. So even if you land it into Wukong's, I guess Wukong's a bad example because of Tortoise form, but every other defense from Wukong, even though you don't win the combat, you still get the effect. Very, very cool. And then we see After Combat something. We really don't know. So it looks like a pretty simple effect, right? We see that it's a 5 value card, so it's kind of like a level with Commanding Impact where you just draw a card. So I don't expect any crazy effects unless like most of her power balance is spent here. But who knows? But a printed 5 is huge. That's just a great value attack, and especially a printed 5 that heals you 1. That's great. We see Battle of Wits. This is the hardest photo to read, but we see, I think it says 3 copies, 4 value boost, which is great, especially for a move 2 fighter. And then reveal the top card of your deck and your opponent's deck. If your card has a higher boost value, deal 3 damage to the opposing fighter. So just looking at this, right, we see that that's a 4 value boost, right? We see Caught Red-Handed down here below is a 2 value boost. So depending on where her boost is, this card will either be a nuts card or okay. I see this like against, for example, Luke Cage. This is going to be a nuts card, right? Against Luke Cage, he's got very, very few 3 boosts. He's got only a couple, very few 2 boosts as well. And then a 17 1 boosts or something crazy like that. So I see this triggering a lot against Luke Cage and just doing raw damage to him. That's huge. So in certain matchups, I think this is going to be nuts. But again, against like Yananga, unless she's got a lot more 4 boosts in this deck, you will almost never see this do damage. So you'll probably want to use it just for mobility, which is cool that it's a boost for. So I love the idea of this is a matchup dependent card. In some cases, you use it for one thing. In other cases, you use it for another. Really, really cool. Caught Red-Handed, probably my favorite card that's been revealed so far. Captain's Orders is close, but caught red-handed. One, because it's a pun, and I'll share why. But after combat, your opponent discards one card. If you won the combat, they discard two cards instead. Okay, finally, we are seeing another regroup type effect, and I am here for it. I love regroup for what it does for tempo, right? You basically like attack the opponent. If they defend big, then you got rid of one of their defenses. The card replaces itself. It's a great effect, but oftentimes you don't want them to take it, and you draw two, right? For tempo purposes, and oftentimes, if you're attacking the main hero with it, taking that one damage is a pretty good deal for the opponent. Here, not so much, right? Your opponent discards one card base level. So if they defend, they have to discard another card. So that's 2 for 1, right? You spent one card and they have to discard another one. Then, if you won the combat, they discard two cards. So if they just take it, they still have to discard two cards. So the only time in which they don't have to discard two cards is if they feint this. And if they feint this one value attack, I think you're totally fine. The reason it's a pun is because it's caught red-handed. And if you think about it and your hand is red-handed, you have a handful of all red cards. And so you can't defend. And so this card discards two. I think that was made aware for me, or made aware by Jason, one of the designers of this cooperative version of the game. So anyway, I love that. That's really cool. And then we just see that it's a one value attack. So you probably want to use it with like Hypno Ray Blaster, the one that reveals the top card of the opponent's deck and adds its boost value to your card, assuming it is a lower printed value, which oftentimes your opponent will want to play a lower value and it's a one boost or a one value attack. So if they throw like a 2 value defense, you throw this, all you need to do is hit a 2 value boost and you get 2 discards and also the one card that they played, which is just nuts for tempo. So just judging by these cards that we have here, we see some healing, we see maybe some damage, auto damage with Battle of Wits, but probably not. It's literally just a dice roll unless you have ways to stack the top of your deck, which we don't know about. It's just a dice roll otherwise. And then we see caught red-handed. So just judging by these cards, I think she's just a huge tempo fighter, right? It sounds like she has some ways to deal damage, but her main kind of game plan is kind of running your opponent out of options and healing at the appropriate times. So managing your gadgets, right? Attacking low with caught red-handed, with Hypno Ray Blaster caught red-handed, maybe knocking 3 cards out of your hands, which is nuts into, anyone, right? And then we see Energizing Spray healing her and getting her something else as well. So really, really cool. Although I would say she maybe is my least anticipated from this set, that doesn't mean much because all 4 of these fighters are basically at the same level for anticipation. We see 2 sidekicks. We see 2 solo fighters. I love solo fighters, but I've been loving the sidekick heroes they've been releasing recently, so I'm excited for all of them. And then just looking at the cards, it just seems like this is such a cool set. So anyway, to close it out, I think we see a lot of tempo-based fighters here that really care about, who's approaching who, knocking some cards out of the opponent's hand, and such. So I think this is a set to be reckoned with. We'll see where they end up, right? We just had the Teen Spirit set, who kind of has a bunch of mid-tiers, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. These fighters, I think, I hope we kind of see them in the similar spot. I think we could afford to maybe see them a little higher, kind of where Houdini and Genie were, or specifically Houdini, maybe just a 1 tier above. I think more fighters in that area and where TS were is totally fine for the competitive scene. So very, very excited for this, and I hope that you back this set. It's just truly amazing, the work that Restoration Games puts in for these. I play tested this set and I am always like, okay, well, I kind of spoiled some of the cards, and so I that's kind of a bummer, but at the same point, you get to see all of the cool artwork on this, which just to me revitalizes my excitement for this set. Just the color schemes, the different artwork, it's just so cool. So $60 USD for this game to me is a steal, because you get 4 fighters, 2 maps, and a whole new way to play the game. That's you know, you can kind of look at it, compare it to like Battle of Legends Volume 2. You basically are gaining a whole new way to play the game with a ton of minions, some cool tokens for like $15. So that's a steal in my opinion. I think if you're just involved in the competitive scene, this is still something to pick up for the $60 price tag. It's a steal, and I was prepared to pay a lot more for this. So very excited. Hope y'all are too. Let me know if there's anything you think I missed, and let me know which fighter you're most excited for in the comments.